Now, get right with Lenny McAllister.
Okay. The way we help bring back America, we build the bridges and bring people together, is by making sure we hold everybody accountable in a 360 fashion. So let me close with this. Yes, there is a change that we can believe in, but it will never come from a politician or a government program.
We cannot find physical sanity here in the land of Lincoln. So Carbondale and Elgin, in which collectively continue to tolerate insanity found on the streets of South Chicago and East Texas.
We got to move away from the American Idol soundbite nature of politics and back to the American statesman of humble servant leadership that we used to see in politics. It is time to roll out the era of the new, educated, engaged, and energized American citizen. I go do the jail ministry. I speak to the kids in the streets. So I'm never going to lay down being a conservative just as much as I'll never lay down being a proud African American.
I feel like a black republic. Money I got coming in. Can't turn my back on the hood. I got love for them. Can't clean my
Well, hello again. Welcome to Hump Day, or whatever you want to call it. Some will call this Hump Day, October 2nd, 2013, and some will call this Day 2, not of October, but of the probably avoidable, almost certainly avoidable government shutdown that has become the angst of everybody in the country except those that obviously fought to shut down the government. I'm not a big fan of doing this, and we'll get into it, but there are some fallacies out there that people keep talking about, and so I want to address some of the falsehoods, some of the things that have been missed on this version of Get Right with Lenny McAllister. Thank you for joining us here on the podcast. I have gotten great feedback so far. Looking forward to talking to you all again on Twitter, on Facebook. You know where to find me on Twitter. It's very simple. It's my name, LennyMcAllister. Find me on Twitter. If you want to find me on Facebook, there are two pages. There is a fan page. There is a friend page. A friend page is over the 5,000 archaic limit, so I apologize about that. But you can still find me on the quote-unquote fan page. I really don't do the fanatical thing, but it's just another way for us to engage each other, looking for your feedback there. Again, it's October 2nd. You have the government shutdown. It's Day 2. You have the Democrats turning down the Republicans when it comes to conference. You have people missing certain facts that are constantly being repeated. And then there are some facts that have just been flat out omitted. Now, before I get to the facts that have just been omitted, I need to get to a fact that I omitted yesterday. So because this got me in trouble. This got me in trouble with the one person I just cannot get in trouble with. Now, the one entity is God, but the one person I can't get in trouble with is my ace. Now, you heard me talk about my ace. You heard me talk about my 2013. So before I get into this government shutdown, who's to blame, what's going on, what people aren't admitting while they're talking to you out there in punditry, in media land, in Spin Cycle 101. Actually, this is probably Spin Cycle 1002, October 2nd, if you will. Let me get to what I admitted. So when I'm talking about 2013, again, this is Lenny McAllister, I'm talking about everything from the election from 2012, the congressional race, the move back to my home state of the Keystone State of Pennsylvania, moving back to my hometown of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where Bucktober is going on. The Pittsburgh Pirates won a playoff game for the first time since before I was a father. I have been a father for pretty much half my life, literally half my life. I love being a dad, but that should tell you how long it's been for the city of Pittsburgh to have a winning baseball team and a playoff game-winning baseball team. So kudos to the Buccos, kudos to the Pittsburgh Pirates as they advance on to the NLDS. But with that said, one of the things that I admitted while I was talking about my 2013 and all the things that were going on was the fact that I added to my family, which some would consider a rather big deal, and especially if you're the person who has the person sitting on your bladder and you have to push. So I forgot to mention, and it's appropriate because today is my son's 6-month-old birthday, if you will. He's 6 months old today. So although I guess I'm shouting out to a 6-month-old and saying I love No, I don't really think he's going to know about the podcast. But I want to make sure that I mention this today, because if I did not mention this, I was going to get it. Because needless to say, my wife heard yesterday's podcast and said, you mentioned a whole bunch of really great things, except the one thing that took 9 months for us to get to. And between the race to the hospital and literally being in labor all of maybe 3 hours tops, this boy was literally born on his due date. We got to the hospital at 20 after 7. He was born at 8:15 in the morning. So, I mean, talk about being punctual. So I need to make sure that I mention that before I get, the old school, the old school rolling pin to the head from the wife for forgetting something as obviously as important as adding another child to our family. So I apologize for that. But let me get on to other facts that have been omitted. Now that I've laid some of the responsibility at my feet, showed some of my flaws, showed some of the things that I have forgotten that are very, very important. So I'm showing you that I'm flawed, that I can do this. And again, I'm putting the disclaimer out there. And again, in your feedback and your comments, I'm looking forward to hearing them. One of the things that I'm telling you is I'm not putting all the blame on Democrats. I'm just bringing up some things that people have obviously forgotten to talk about during this whole debate and fiasco. And I want to hear your feedback on this. Again, you know where to find me on Twitter. You know where to find me on Facebook. Everybody keeps quoting that this is a Romneycare idea, that this is a Republican program from Massachusetts that Governor Romney basically created, that everybody got on board with, that was bipartisan, and therefore the Republicans should just be quiet, shut it down, get on board, and go from there. Here's the problem with that. If anybody knows the history of what happened in Mitt Romney's one gubernatorial term in Massachusetts from 2002 to 2006, if you know, or 2007, somewhere in there, it's 2003, 2007, 2002, 2006, somewhere in that time frame, one term, you understand. And this is the stuff that the Democrats used against Romney just this time last year. So everybody has this political amnesia that is perplexing to me. But I want to bring this out. Number one, Mitt Romney endured so many vetoes as governor that he couldn't get any of his ideas passed. Literally, he was locked down by both chambers of the Massachusetts General Assembly because it was controlled by nothing but Democrats. So it wasn't as though he had this grand idea that he presented to the General Assembly, and Republicans and Democrats, which, by the way, Republican it's a pretty interesting term to use in Massachusetts. There's not too many of them. There's like Scott Brown, his extended family, and 4 people living in Springfield someplace. That's pretty much it. So when you put that out there, and you remember the fact that this was not a bipartisan kumbaya by all these Republicans and all these Democrats that came together in this bipartisan term and voted basically unanimously to pass this. You understand that, one, this probably wasn't a Republican idea that came from Mitt Romney. I understand some people try to tie it back to heritage, but they mainly make the point about Massachusetts, which leads to number 2. If you know the history of what transpired in Massachusetts with Romneycare, you understand that it was a Democratic idea that Romney got on board with in order to have something to hang his hat on when it was time for him to run for the presidency. No one wants to bring that up. People keep saying this is Mitt Romney's idea. This is Mitt Romney's idea. No, it was not. This was a Democratic idea that was presented by Democrats in Massachusetts that Mitt Romney got on board because this was something that was going to pass. This was something that he could put his name on. This is something that he thought he would be able to promote should he run for the presidency, which he did twice. 2008. Didn't work out so well. 2012 didn't work out so well either, but at least he got the nomination. So all these folks, they continue to bring up these facts, just like they'll bring up the fact that the Republicans shut down the government. No, Congress shut down the government. Republicans had their hand in this. I give you that. But when you see the president threatening to veto a piecemeal agreement last night, October 1st, where they were going to fund some aspects of the government. And the Democrats said no. And President Obama said, and I will veto it even if it passes. You cannot continuously lay this at the feet of the Republicans. You can lay a lot there. I'll give you that. But you can't lay it all there. Just like you can't say that Romneycare is a Republican idea that came from a Republican governor in a blue state that they both agreed upon, that he created, that they move forward with, that has been implemented, that people like. There's a lot of facts about this, whether it's the origin of where this idea came from or how this has been playing out, that people continue to not pay attention to. I mean, another thing that I thought was very interesting. You know, you do the research and you look at what everybody's talking about, et cetera. And I'm talking about the facts. I'm not talking about necessarily, for example, you know, should Ted Cruz have filibustered or some of the other stuff that's come up. So I'm trying to stick with certain things. You know, people keep talking about the premiums are coming down until they go up, and it's all over the place. People talk about the computer glitches, and an argument was made on Crossfire yesterday that, well, the computer systems crashed because everybody was trying to sign up. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I can get on a website and look at a website to see what's going on there. I mean, everybody jumps on Twitter to follow a trend. And Twitter breaks from time to time. No one's necessarily all trying to get into the conversation, but they are trying to follow the trend of what's out there. I purport to you that there's a good percentage of people that wanted to see what healthcare.org.gov was all about. They wanted to see what was going on this website. Doesn't mean they were necessarily going to join immediately. And anytime you know you're going to have this big rush going in there and you can't handle the traffic, there's a problem. You know, they got the best and the brightest in the government working on this website, knowing that this is a historic program that's being rolled out, and it still crashed. That's not a good sign. They could not afford to have this happen. Because again, when you look at the whole situation, if you take a step back and you look at how it genuinely looks, and I'm not saying it's not going to work over the long term, or I'm not blaming Democrats or Republicans. I'm just saying let's be objective for just a second. I know you're sitting there saying you're a Republican pundit. You can't be. I can be. This is what I'm trying to be, though. Objective. So just bear with me for just a second. You have self-repeal going on. You have the unions turning against it. You have the way this whole thing was created in the first place, which was 100% through partisanship and a majority of Americans not liking the whole law in its current form. And I continue to stress that. There are good things in the ACA, but there are some bad things in the ACA. And if you remember, the way it passed the Supreme Court was not that it was a legal law to force somebody to buy a product. John Roberts sat there and said, well, if it's a tax, then Congress has the right to tax, and therefore it's legal. So even with how it was passed in the Supreme Court was this twisted, nuanced, kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge type of way of getting it through. So nobody likes how it passed in Congress. No, with the procedural type of Olympics going on, in addition to all the questionable backroom deals with one Democrat to another. No one likes how the Supreme Court passed this by saying it's not a health care law, it's a tax, which is another way of skirting what it actually is, which it's a law, it's a health care law. And then nobody likes the rest of this, how the Republicans are opposing this or anything else. And then you look at the unions are against it. Then you look at you're having these computer glitches. Then you look at there are complaints of premiums going up. And, you know, you got the example in New Hampshire where the top dozen or so hospitals will not accept the plans that are available through Obamacare. So now you got people that are used to these 12 hospital systems or so, groups of doctors or so, etc., that now can no longer go to their doctor that they're used to, which, by the way, what was one of the promises of this? You'll be able to keep your doctor, everything will be streamlined, and things will be cheaper. So you're finding that in many instances it's not cheaper, even though I hear in some it is. But in many instances, it's not cheaper. In some instances, you can't keep the same doctor. You have a bunch of glitches from the computer aspect of this, which is where you're supposed to apply online. Some of the biggest supporters of it have jumped off board and the employer mandate has been delayed. Then on top of that, you hear that this was a Republican idea, and it wasn't. It was a Democratic idea coming out of Massachusetts, not a Republican idea. And the majority of Americans still don't like this law as is. Now, I would purport to you, and again, I want your feedback on Facebook and on Twitter. Again, I appreciate you joining us on the podcast today. I would purport to you that if the Republican brand name wasn't so bad, if the Tea Party brand name wasn't so bad, if the conservative brand name wasn't so bad, more Americans in the middle politically, more moderates on the Democratic and Republican side, would be on board being against the ACA. I also think that one of the omitted facts that I continue to hear people ignore is the fact that the polls from day one in 2009 show that the American people were against this law in its current form, in the way it was passed, in some of its applications, and then some of the self-repeal, which in and of itself is illegal. You can't put a law into place and then say, well, I'm going to delay certain aspects because my constituency, my political constituency, my supporters want this to be withheld, want this to be delayed, or an admission of guilt. We cannot roll this out effectively right now. And there are enough examples of this to make the Republicans have a point, from the omitted facts to what's actually going on out there. Now, it doesn't mean that the Republicans are taking the right approach. In fact, I've written an article on Global Grind that'll be out today that talks about the lack of diversity in the GOP. Not the ethnic diversity, but the philosophical diversity within the conservative movement that would have afforded Republicans the opportunity to be able to have solutions that are still conservative, but avoided a shutdown. To have solutions and proposals that could have come up in April, in May, in August even, that would have avoided this point of time, that would have allowed us to not have to go through a government shutdown, that would have allowed us to be able to negotiate in good faith. Maybe delay this by 6 months. Maybe delay other aspects of this. Not look like the hardliners that the Republican Party continues to look like the conservatives continue to look like. And you see that there's a faction now within the Republicans in Congress, particularly the House of Representatives, that are saying, listen, let's just get this through and let's move forward from there. I still question, where's the plan for 2016? Because at this point in time, there was a chance to possibly win the Senate. If this rolls out and doesn't work well, the Republicans have an opportunity to win in 2014 and or 2016, and then you can scale this back. You know, everybody says, well, once you give the American people an entitlement, you can't take it back. Well, when it's a brand new entitlement and it doesn't work for them and it's expensive, in the era of social media, of 24-hour news cycles and everything else, you can roll it back. But you have to have the vision to sit there and say, even if this is law in 2013, must it be law in 2014? Heck, we have prohibition. That got rolled back. We have had other laws in place that have been out there for, years, or in some instances, like prohibition was over a decade, that eventually got rolled back. And prohibition was in the Constitution. We're not even talking about just a general law. That was a constitutional amendment. So it can be done. But again, it goes back to, one, who has the diversity of thought within the conservative movement to figure out how to get to 2014 and 2016 with wins that will allow those things to be put in place, number one. Number two, who has the diversity of perspective, of savvy, if you will, within the media, within political circles, to give the Republican brand name a different view of what we need to be, of what we need to look like, in order to get out of this situation, but still present to the American people an opportunity to say, we're not remembering all the facts. We're admitting a lot of the facts. And as we live out what we're going through, I think it becomes more evident to all of us that we need to take a different approach. So although we want healthcare costs to come down, and for some of you it might have, but for many of you it might not have, and we want there to be some kind of marketplace mechanism that allows the cost to come down and allows the benefits of healthcare programs and healthcare plans and healthcare offerings to be more robust, kind of like how it is in the free market when it comes to technology or other products. This is not the way to do it. This is not the way to do it with government dominating it as much as it has been. And we have yet to see that because there's so many facts that are just being thrown out there, in some regards by both sides, if you will. But there's so many, quote unquote, I should say, facts that are being thrown out there that aren't really representing what we're seeing. That without the savvy, the flexibility, the pliancy to make that argument to more people. And what we're seeing right now is the Republican Party is making the case to their base. They cannot make the case to the center. They cannot make the case to the center left. That's where they have to win. They only can make their case to the base, and the base is there, but the base can't vote them into anything significant. They can vote them into gerrymandered districts at the state level and gerrymandered districts at the congressional level. They cannot win Senate races the way they should. Well, we've seen that from 2010 in Delaware on through. And they have not been able to win presidential popular votes. And that's not going to change. So at some point in time, you have to see from the conservative movement. And it'll be interesting to see who this is. Because right now the people that are rising to the top are people that talk to the base even more. Rand Paul, Ted Cruz, the Tea Party element. If the Republican Party is going to lead, and I continue to say this, a diverse America through the 21st century, at some point in time, you're going to have to see the Republican Party be able to talk to more people that are not just in middle America, but in urban America, in political middle America. And they haven't been able to do that yet. So it'd be interesting to see who rises to the top, if they're going to continue to slam Christie or if there's going to be somebody else that does that. What is your take on this? You know where to find me. Find me on Facebook, Lenny McAllister. Find me on Twitter, LennyMcAllister. I'm looking forward to talking to you again tomorrow. Thank you for your time. I'll talk to you soon. TCNGB. You know I love you. Take care and God bless. Peace.